shooter is a degenerate genre that is the worst of both tactical shooters and MOBAs. I just wanted to interject to put in a small definition here. When I say micro-positioning, I mean your position on a screen, be it your own screen or someone else's screen. And macro-positioning is the player's location in a level or map. In tactical shooters, there is the factor of the deathmatch. That is, regardless of all other objectives, every player has the capacity to kill every enemy player a sufficient number of times to win the game. In MOBAs, there is the factor of tempo, the art of plays and counterplays, more abstract but appropriately so, as a proper MOBA is an expression of macroscopic decision-making. Now, a hero shooter has neither of these mechanics. What is it actually based on? Menial skill shots, and sometimes not even that. It is the continued application of one or two abilities. Sometimes they're skill shots, and sometimes they aren't, to targets or applied in relation to objectives that almost never change. Not positioning, not tempo, not aiming, not the deathmatch, but menial skill shots, and often not even that. The weapons, or quote, left clicks, unquote, as to juxtapose them to the right clicks of MOBAs, and to differentiate them from the distinguished arsenals of tactical shooters, simply do not administer enough damage on most heroes for the deathmatch to be a relevant factor in gameplay. Only a few heroes seem to be able to play deathmatch, and almost none of them to the degree that is possible in an actual first-person shooter game. Even as we examine the properties of each hero's left click, are they actually that different from each other? In a tactical shooter, each weapon is defined by multiple qualitative, quantitative, and universally relevant statistics which determine their use and role in gameplay. In a hero shooter, each character is tied inherently to a weapon which doesn't do significant enough damage to make micro-positioning relevant, except in very few cases, but I'll discuss those later. Now, on the other hand, some shooters, not tactical shooters, have much longer TTKs, such as Halo. In Halo, there is a skill to tracking your opponent, and outplaying them usually goes beyond simply the realm of movement. There are more than two factors at play in outplaying someone in Halo. Yet, because movement is not nearly as expressive in hero shooters as it is in either floatier shooters like Halo, or as surgical as it is in tactical shooters like Counter-Strike, only tracking is left as an expression of skill, but not even, because it's not that expressive, because most heroes, in fact, I don't think any hero has faster default movement than any other hero, which, I should bring up the fact that in MOBAs, different heroes have different default move speeds, and that's relevant to positioning, to gameplay. Now, back to the shooting, it ultimately is less degenerate in comparison to true shooters than the MOBA elements are. But it's still pretty awful and not fun, because even when you get to characters that can actually play deathmatch, it's not relevant because there's no macro positioning. There's no expectation that someone might genuinely outplay you. It's just expected that these heroes will appear to your left side, to your flank, and then just maybe one tap, maybe two people before he gets giga nuked by the rest of the team. There's really no point in most heroes even having a left click attack. It just isn't relevant to gameplay at all. But to understand the true degeneration involved in the construction of a hero shooter, we have to look at the degeneration of team roles. I'm talking about position 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We'll start with support, 4th and 5th positions, because they are easily hit the hardest by the terrible decisions in the design of a hero shooter. The role of support, quote, support, unquote, in a hero shooter, which is really the role of healer most of the time, is the most inconceivably boring and inactive place for a player to be in. They are hardly noticeable until the end screen where you check their healing stat. There is no warding in a hero shooter. There are no rotations or ganking. There is barely any flanking. There are no runes to secure, and there are no creeps whatsoever. The support role has degenerated into entirely healing and disabling with a heavy emphasis on the former. The core roles, instead of the distinguished, unique roles of the first, second, and third position, have instead degenerated into the roles of damage and tank. We will discuss the tank first. First, we're going to discuss the tank, because the tank is an inherently improper role to have in a PvP game. Human players have agency. Their actions are not determined by, quote, aggro, unquote. They are not algorithms using deterministic decision-making. And they will never, assuming no other factors are present, focus their attacks on a mere gigantic pool of health over more important targets. To fix this, the genius hero shooter devs decided that the tank role, instead of, just changing the premise of the role, they decided that the role itself will be the most obnoxious and disruptive possible, which is a horrible design principle. Rather than address the fact that the premise of their design is wrong, i.e. just being a huge wall of HP that players are expected to interact with for no reason, they reduced player agency to force something that shouldn't happen, to curtail the absolutely useless fundamental principle. It is addressing an intrinsic issue with an extrinsic remedy. The unique differences between the mid and the off-lane cores are lost, as are the differences between each type of off-laner and each type of mid. But what of the damage roll? Sure, the first position is almost universally an extremely high damage roll, but there is an intrinsic difference between these duelists or damage type heroes and the nuance of first position gameplay, which is itemization. Hero shooters have no economy. There is no question of itemization as in MOBAs or weapon choice as in tactical shooters. The economy isn't relevant to roles that are supposed to output. When the economy isn't relevant to roles that are supposed to output extremely high amounts of total damage, where itemization can change both the manner in which the damage is applied and the type of damage being applied, then every single game is the same. There is no unique choice of item to counter an enemy hero, no situational choice between fighting and farming, as in no macro positional gameplay, and most significantly, no timings. Without timings and power spikes, on top of the lack of macro positioning, the damage roll of a hero shooter is completely gutted, and playmaking, tempo control, is non-existent as a factor of the gutting of all the previously mentioned roles. The damage roll, specifically, is relegated to left-clicking and sometimes right-clicking, and maybe even skill spamming. Wow, ability spamming, that's really fun. But due to the fact that deathmatching isn't a factor in gameplay, even the nuance of shooting, of gunplay, is gone. It's really just ability spam and left-clicking. And this moves me to the next part of my video, which is not the idea that hero shooters can be good, per se. I don't think there's ever been a good hero shooter, really of any kind. But in terms of hero shooters that can be not bad, or that have been not bad, off the top of my head, there's only one, and it's Gundam Evo, because of the fact that it had some tempo and at least incorporated deathmatching elements. It had its problems, but in terms of left-clicking and playmaking, it was designed around being able to do both of those things, which is already so much better than this Chinese shovelware garbage like Marvel Rivals. There was a higher emphasis on positioning, both macro and micro, with the boost mechanic, because you were able to sprint and dash. So at the beginning of a map, instead of just hanging around, I mean, you did do the stupid, like, 30 seconds hanging around in base thing, which was, it's stupid. I don't know why any fucking shooter does that. There's no reason to do that ever. They did that, but the boost mechanic allowed every player to properly flank. And unlike with what I'm seeing from Marvel Rivals, at least in terms of my first impressions, flanking is not nearly as prevalent in Rivals as it is with Gundam Evo. And even then, it's only with a few heroes. In Gundam Evo, because of the fact that everyone could deathmatch, or at least pretty much everyone. I can't think of anyone who couldn't. Everyone could deathmatch. But yeah, flanking was just more prominent. Everyone could do it. And in terms of micro positioning, like dashing, it made shooting people actually hard and shooting at people more fun. You know, but boost was based. Okay, most hero shooters should have something like that. Even if it's a stamina bar, I hate stamina bars, but I'd rather have that than just the slow, glacial movement of Marvel Rivals. Even the movement mechanics that are in Marvel Rivals are just not prominent enough, not good enough, and really not low cooldown enough to be used for macro positioning. Maybe micro positioning, maybe it's not so bad for that, but in terms of macro positioning, you're not going to see a lot of that. You're not going to see a lot of anything with Marvel Rivals, because it's going to die pretty soon, considering it's Chinese shovelware, and is probably some form of malware because it forces itself to launch an administrator, which is very suspicious. Yeah, the other thing about Gundam Evo is that abilities were not recycled trash and stuff actually looked cool. In Marvel Rivals, everything looks like Chinese shit, which is not good. I don't want Punisher to look like a Chinese cartoon man, okay? That is not what the Punisher is. He is not this, he's not the big silly man, you're seeing him use a turret right now. Like, Punisher does not have a frigging sci-fi space turret, and he shouldn't have one. That's silly. That's stupid. Thor is, because I was playing Thor in these clips, he's not that bad from a design standpoint, but it's still not a great design for Thor. It's just not very characteristic of who he is. It's not very characteristic of Marvel Comics. I guess if we're talking about, evergreen Disney bullshit that Marvel's turned into, then yeah, sure. I guess it works. I guess it works if you like garbage. That's what most of the designs are meant to be, is evergreen garbage. But I don't see Marvel Rivals lasting from any standpoint. Gundam Evo, though, was thankfully designed in a way that abilities, and I'm going to focus on abilities here because abilities are kind of a microcosm for endurance. The problem with Gundam Evo, though, was, I don't know, just they made horrible financial decisions with that game. But in terms of gameplay design, the abilities were all independently viable. And I don't mean that in the sense that you can use only one ability and win the game, but I mean you can use them individually and not combo them all at the same time and, you know, be able to play the game. All these Marvel Rivals abilities are meant to be used in this stupid, like, self-wombo combo. That is not fun gameplay. That is boring. That is stupid. Don't ever give me these abilities ever. They're not fun. They're not good gameplay. But all of the combined good factors of Gundam Evo, the fun mobile suit design, mobile weapon design technically, because there were mobile armors in there too, but the fun mobile weapon design, and by that I mean both the left clicking and the abilities, the playmaking, you know, the deathmatch, the tempo, the movement mechanics, and even the aesthetic. The aesthetic wasn't really that terrible, especially not in comparison to this anime Fortnite bullshit aesthetic. It was not bad. Unlike Marvel Rivals, it was not bad. But since we're on the topic of aesthetic, I wanted to bring up this because a friend pointed this out to me. These are streamer games. These are meant to be evergreen streamer TikTok bullshit games with no real relevance to any kind of esports. I mean, some of them do have esports, right? Like Valorant, but like with Overwatch esports got like nuked, right? And I think what big companies saw with that was Overwatch had a much more permanent status in culture through TikTok and stupid internet bullshit, really pornography, which is the lowest form of, it's not even entertainment, it's a drug. You might as well compare it to heroin. Pornography is a drug trade. So in terms of drugs, Overwatch had a much bigger drug culture than it did esports culture, and companies saw that, and now companies realize that they can sell their games as a drug, you know, as something for streamers to sell dopamine to kids with rather than actual video games. And I heard some rumors that Overwatch hired pornographic technicians for their game. I'm not sure I believe that, but I definitely would believe that. I would not be surprised. It's just this really disgusting homogenization and what's the word? Pornographication. The way everything's becoming more pornographic now, it's really gross. Because there's a difference between depicting people at the height of physical activity, at peak physique, you know. I mean, both women and men, and pornography, which is what they're making now. It's just very gross. And I hate it. I hate everything about these hero shooters, about casualized games, about these streamer games, about the horrible things that streaming has done to humanity. And I think this is the end of the things I'm going to say about hero shooters, because they suck dick. They're terrible. They fucking suck. retarded games for streamers to play for a month and then quit. Fuck streamers. Fuck, especially WoW playing streamers. Fuck that shit. Literally the most boring game ever. More boring than Marvel Rivals, to be honest. That ends everything I have to say about these garbage piece of shit video games.